This is the reassembly of the NSU Quickly 2-speed engine. These are the three casings. I've just put them together there. I've cleaned them off as best I can. The 4 bolts that are there, I must clean them off yet, but one of them I'm going to replace it because it's damaged. The bolts that were holding the casings together are these double-ended bars. I never reuse them if I can avoid them, so I've all new bolts to go on and a new casing bolt as well. That's the spindle for the pedals, which was missing. They're the new washers for it, for putting on the pedals. That spindle is belonged to it as well. And that's another spindle that goes in one of the gear spindles. These are all the items for the clutch in the order in which I must put them back in. Like that. That'll all become evident when I do the video. These are all the parts for the clutch cup in the order that they go back in. These are the gear dogs in the order in which they'll be going back in. That'll all become evident as well. Now, when I took this off the engine, one of the lugs on the end of it is broken, so I have some in my spares, so I'm putting in a new one, so this will go back into spares. These are some of the other nuts and bolts that will be required. New woodruff keys, a total new set of oil seals, and a total new set of bearings. So that's it for the moment. We'll get back on with it now. The first thing to do is to put it back onto the frame and to put the conrod back in. Actually, before putting the conrod in, I've got to put in the new bearings. So I'll take these apart again now and I'll start to put in the bearings and see. Right, where the conrod goes is 6202. So we'll put that on there now. That's the 6202 bearing in place, and at the other side of that goes a seal ring, which is 20-35-7. So I must put that in next. That's the old one that came out. Now that's the seal ring in place, so that's that one done. Now I'm just about to put the conrod in there. I've put that section back onto the frame because you can't work with it otherwise. So this is the clutch side of the conrod, and that's the side that goes through here. So I'll tap that into place there now, and that's what it looks like coming out the other side. Right, that's the conrod in at that side now. Right, at the other side of the conrod we have to fit another 6202, and at the opposite side there's also an oil seal. Now that's the bearing installed there. I must install the seal at the opposite side here now. That one. Now that's the oil seal at that side. Now there's another oil seal here on the pedal crank, and while one gets them in a kit, they're not exactly the same as the ones that are already in there, so I normally tend to leave it. Installing the bearings, the best thing to do is to use a heat gun to heat it up so that it expands and it goes in easier, and then when it contracts it tightens up on it. But I don't ever use the heat gun, only put in these seals when it's cooling down, starting to cool down. Right, the bearing there now is a 6201, which I've just installed. Right, the first thing to install is the pedal pinion, which goes through like so. It needs 2 hands to push it through. Right, that's it through there now. The next thing to install is this mechanism here, which is made up of a washer. That goes on there. Well, there is another washer in there. This washer get on there, and then into here, like so. Then this piece goes on next, and that goes on there, and that catches on that bottom section below. But as you can just see, I've put it on incorrectly. This is the way it has to be upwards, otherwise it doesn't sit down correctly. Right, the next thing to do is to put in this pinion here, and there's a heavy washer first, then this dog, which has a washer on top as well. So that's all that mechanism together now. Now the next thing to do is to put a gasket on this section here, because this housing is going to be going on there with all these gears in place. Now before we do that, we have to put this in, which goes through there. Right, I've got them in there now, and that has to be below that, so that it moves up and down like that on the spindle. And at the other side you have to put in a small circlip here which operates it. Now this is gasket set for a 2-speed Quickly. Now I'm out putting on a flexible gasket out of a tube. And I'm going to put on the paper gasket like so, and the flexible gasket helps to keep it in position, but also hopefully will, if there's any little bit of damage to the casing itself, it'll hopefully stop any leaks. And flexible gasket on that side now as well, and because there's a washer here that can fall out, you have to put it up at an angle into the other casing. Right, that's that casing up in position there now. I must put through the casing bolt now to tie the two of them together, which is there. Okay, I've tightened up the casing bolt there, which runs through those two casings, and I'm just checking this mechanism to see that it's going up and down, which it is. There's no washers inside in the oil sump area. Good. Now the next thing to install is the clutch mechanism, which goes on there. Now before I do that, there's a rubber seal which must go on. There's a rubber seal goes down inside there, and this is it. So now I need two hands to do that, so I need to push it down. There's a little groove down at the bottom of it, so that it's actually an oil seal and an air seal. Right, you can just about see it there now after I'm pushing it down. Sitting down at the bottom there. Okay, the next piece to put on is this mechanism here. Just give it a clean before I put it in. Right, this goes down over that spline. If you remember, when we were disassembling the engine, it was actually very difficult to get it out. And it goes down much easier, but I still will have to tap it down because this little circlip, there's a groove on that spline there to hold this in position. Right, I tapped it down now, and you can see the groove there. That's the groove for the circlip to hold that in place. Right, I'm installing the circlip there now. That's it in position. Okay, it's down in the groove. Next thing to install now is one of the clutch plates. It goes on like so. Then the metal separating one. Which will only go on with those grooves. Then the second plate, like so. And last of all, this piece here. Right, that's that. To install is this big wheel here, which goes on over this here. Note the washer that's here, that washer must be there. And just press it down. The next pieces to go back on are all these bits up as far as the clutch cup, and then the clutch spring to keep it in position. Okay, so the first thing to do is to put the bearing, and this section must be up. Just give that a click. On top of that now goes the spring. Next piece is the cup, and it goes in like a saucer, like so. So as you can see, we need to decompress the spring so that we can put the two spring washers and the nut on. So there's a special tool for that. Here we are. And that goes on like so. And you have to use engine bolts number 5 and number 8. Yep. Number 5 and number 8 to tighten it down. Installed this spring decompression unit here with the two bolts, and now I can get the two spring washers on like so, and I can get the nut on as well. So I just need to tighten that down now with a ratchet. Right, that's the nut in place there now. I think it was a 14mm ratchet I had to use on it. So I need to take off the decompressing unit now to continue. Right, that's bolt number 5 going back in its position. Bolt number 8, and we're finished with that. Right, the next thing to install now is the clutch cup and then the retaining spring to hold it in place. Now There's a rubber seal there on these cups always, and I normally tend not to change them, and the reason I don't change them is because the ones that you get in a set normally, they're much narrower and they don't seem to work, so normally these don't really need replacing, in my estimation anyway. Just to show you before I go putting the clip on, because it's hard to video it, this is the way the clip goes on underneath, and you have to prise it with a screwdriver then to get it up into place. Now sometimes these cups come off easy and go back on easy, but not always. So there's a section cut out here which is for this wheel here, like so. So I have to clean it there now. It went on quite easily. Right, the next thing to do now is to put this clip on, but to do that I'm going to turn the engine sideways. Right, I've turned the engine sideways so that the clip will kind of fall into this groove here. Now I've kind of set it into the angle there, and then hopefully all I have to do is to prise it down into place with a screwdriver. Right, it's just after clicking into position there. It takes a bit of fiddling, but you'll get it eventually. This was the casing that was on the engine, but the stand part of it was broken and there was a bit of damage there. Probably be okay, but the stand part being broken was a major issue. So I managed to find one in my spares and I've cleaned it off. So now I must put the bearing into it, and I must put the seal on the outside here. Right, the bearing for here is a 6201. The seal ring is a 1232-7. It's item number 16, 1232 by 7. There it is there. Next thing to do now is to put a gasket on here. So I'm going to put some flexible gasket on again first to hold it in place. That's the gasket in place, and I'll put some flexible gasket on this side here as well. The flexible gasket on the other side, and all I have to do now is attach it on here, and then I can tighten up the engine with all the bolts. Before I do that, I must put back in this spline. In there. That spline is in now. That the back brake goes onto that. So I'm going to offer it up to this here now. Now that's all 8 bolts in position. Next thing to do now is to put on the clutch lever unit here. I must put in the oil seals, the level indicator and the drain. Right, you need to push the pin through like so. And circlip at either side there to hold it in place. Now that's it in place with the 2 circlips, hold it in place. So there's pressure on the clutch anyway. Right, I'm just installing the level indicator plug there now with a copper washer. I'll have to use 2 hands to install the level indicator screw there now, and the drain plug screw. I've used the old one that was on it, was perfect. Now I'm going to put the sprocket on, so I'm going to actually put a new sprocket on and a new woodruff key, which is the thicker of the two. This one. So the woodruff key goes on here. Right, that's the woodruff key in place. Right, that's the carburetor in place there now. So the engine is now basically finished. I've put one of my spare covers there on the side of it. I can attach a stand bracket on there if I need to. So that's it, the NSU Quickly 2-speed engine.